The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom. Fundamental rational self-interest. And individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Christmas Eve. Hopefully everybody is gearing up towards Christmas and excited about the next few days. And yeah, it's a great time. It's a great time of the year. It's fun. It's exciting. I have to say, this year for me, it's just been like, what holiday season? It's like I'm just starting to recover from traveling. It is it's strange. So I haven't had that experience of Thanksgiving to Christmas or to New Year, kind of a little more laid back, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more planning into the future. Haven't had that. I don't know about you. What's for Christmas Eve dinner? Mario Pagan. So, yeah, a famous Puerto Rican chef. I'm not eating him, but he is making me dinner, basically. So we've got a reservation later this evening, and we're heading over there. So that's my plan. Hopefully you guys have plans too. For tonight, for tomorrow, Christmas. I'm sure many of you with family, friends, I hope everybody has a fantastic and great time. All right, so let's talk news. We're going to talk about a bunch of different things today. We'll talk about the Iran and the Houthis. We'll talk about global trade, which is related to Houthis a little bit. We'll talk about healthy food. Healthy food. You guys know what healthy food is? CFPB, Honda, and Nissan merging. Mystery drones, but this time really mysterious drones. Not the New Jersey type, but the kind of covert, really high-tech, mysterious ones. National security threat type. We'll talk about those. And then, I've got, 20 other stories we could run. We should definitely talk about the terrorist attack in Germany. We should definitely talk about the Saudi who ran over people in the Christmas market in a city whose name I can't pronounce in Germany. So we'll definitely try to find time to talk about that. And then, of course, we are open to taking questions from you, the viewer. Anything you want to ask about, you get to shape the show. So super chat questions open, and so feel free to ask questions as the show goes on. All right, so let's jump right in and talk about Iran. And primarily, I think the real question right now is, and I think the question that Israel has on its mind is, what is Trump going to do? What is the plan? What is Trump going to do when he comes into office? Supposedly, there's significant discussions within the Trump transition team about, well, what do we do? What do we do with Iran? Iran is in a corner. They're dramatically weakened. How is the United States, once in office, going to deal with Iran? Like every other president, pretty much, Trump has said that he will not accept a nuclear Iran with nuclear weapons. So what's he going to do about it? And I guess they're considering a number of different options. They're considering using this opportunity to really squeeze Iran in terms of a negotiated deal, and try that. They're considering the United States going in there and just, crushing the Iranians and stopping, and destroying their nuclear capabilities that way. They're considering, instead of the United States doing it, just giving a green light for Israel to do it and letting Israel go in and do as much harm as it can to Iran's nuclear program. Of course, we've talked about many times on the show the fact that that is not going to be easy for Israel to do, given the lack of the big 35,000-pound bunker-busting bombs that Israel just doesn't have. They're considering Israel and the U.S. together bombing the Iranians, bombing their nuclear program. They're considering letting Israel bomb and then negotiating. So they're looking at different alternatives, different scenarios. We don't know yet where they are landing up, what the conclusion is. Israel, I think, is very much concerned about what is the Trump administration's ultimate program going to be, ultimate attitude towards Iran going to be. There's also reason to believe that Israel might just decide to take matters into its own hands, or might get a positive signal from the Trump administration before Trump takes office. It could be that Trump says, I'd like the Iran situation taken care of before I even get to the White House. I don't want to have to deal with this crap. And if he gives some kind of indication to the Israeli government, and Israel might wait until the week before Trump is sworn in, or 2 weeks before. So I'd say, the 2 weeks starting on the 10th, from the 10th to 10th of January, maybe a little earlier. According to Boaz, who I do the show in Hebrew with, Boaz thinks Israel is going to take out the Iranian nuclear program after the 10th of January. That is, they're going to do it during a sweet spot where Biden can't do anything because he's on his way out, literally. There just isn't enough time for him really to do anything if he's pissed off at the U.S. And Trump might be thankful because it takes this issue off the table for him. So according to Boaz, somewhere between the 10th and the 20th of January is going to be when Israel really takes out the Iranian nuclear program. Maybe also takes out the regime. I think one thing that Israel won't do, and it doesn't matter who's in the White House, is they won't go after the oil. That is, I think the U.S., if it's going to negotiate with Iran, wants the oil on the table for negotiations, wants to be able to say, no, we'll completely stop all oil exports from you if you don't sign a deal. They need that tool. If Israel takes out the oil, that goes away. Now, maybe Iran goes away generally if Israel does that. But the other thing that might happen if Israel really was going to go all out, was really, going to follow up on what it did to Hezbollah and what it did in Syria recently, that is the potential for Israel actually to take out the Iranian leadership. I'm skeptical about that, but again, if that happens, that might happen just before Trump comes into office. So it's going to be interesting to see in about 2 weeks. Yeah, about 2 weeks. We've got a week until this year is over, and then another week before we get to that 2 weeks before inauguration sweet spot, to see if it actually happens. I hope Boaz is right. I am rooting for that, but I am at the same time skeptical. But I hope it is. In the meantime, the Houthis continue to make their presence known. One is they continue to block shipping through the Suez Canal. We'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about global trade. But they also, every other day, I was just talking to my sister, and she was like, yeah, the Houthis are dedicated to not letting us sleep through the night. So she says, like, every other day, between 2 and 4 a.m., the air raid shelter, the sirens go off, and they have to rush into the air raid shelter. Between 2 and 4 a.m., like every other day, not every day, every other day, the Houthis launch some ballistic missile, some drone in the direction of Tel Aviv. And my sister has to hustle with her family into the air raid shelter, which is a major distress. At least the attacks on the north have stopped, but now they still have this. Israel's getting impatient. I think today, like the defense secretary basically said, and I think Netanyahu backed him up, yeah, we're just going to destroy them. So the expectation now is that Israel is going to do to the Houthis what they did to Hezbollah. First of all, they're going to destroy their entire infrastructure. I mean, they've already done a lot. They took out their 3 ports. They took out a major refinery and a power plant. But it sounds like Israel's now dedicated to doing a lot more, maybe several attacks in a row. Not, it is 2,000 kilometers away. They have to refuel on the way there. It is a major operation. It's very expensive for Israel. But I think the Israelis are sick and tired of this. Also, I think Israel is going to go after Houthi leadership. There's talk about the Israelis starting to target Houthi leadership. They'll need robust intelligence to do that. I don't know if they have it, or maybe they'll rely on intelligence from the Saudis. The Saudis might be willing to share that kind of intelligence. The Saudis have been fighting the Houthis, or were fighting the Houthis, for years, until about a year ago or a year and a half ago when they had a ceasefire. They might get intelligence in the United States, but the idea is that Israel is pretty much ready to take out the Houthis and to really destroy them. The Houthis claim they will keep bombing as long as there's fighting in Gaza. On the other hand, there might just be a ceasefire in Gaza, which it sounds like Israel and are very close to making a deal with Hamas about, and that'll stop the Houthis. But hopefully, before the ceasefire in Gaza, the Israelis actually take them out. That they actually do to the Houthis what they did to Hamas, what they did to Hezbollah, and of course what they did to Syria's armaments, let's say, and that is take the initiative and just crush them, Finally, just quickly on the Middle East, I'll just say if you want to ask a question, feel free to do so, but Super Chat is the way to do it. I can't keep track of the chat, and I can't keep track of all the questions in the chat. So Super Chat is the way to highlight a question and get me to answer it. I answer all the Super Chat questions, even the not so nice ones. So use that. In particular, we're looking for some $20 questions because, we've got to make up some time. We've got 250 for the first hour. We've got another 220 to go. Another kind of, way in which you can see the Middle East has changed, and that Israel has basically completely realigned and caused Iran to go into a massive defensive front, and then add to that the uncertainty that Trump coming into office creates, is the fact that over the last few days, the pro-Iranian Iraqi militias, so these are militias in Iraq, pro-Iranian, that have been lobbing bombs into Israel. They've also been fighting in Syria. They've also been doing anything that basically the Iranians want them to do. They've been a branch of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Islamic Revolutionary Guard, and they've been actively engaged in creating mayhem in the Middle East. Anyway, they have reached an agreement with the Lebanese government. This is the Al-Akbar, yes, Al-Akbar, which is a U.S. designated terrorist group. They have reached an agreement with the Iraqi Prime Minister that they will not interfere in Syria and that they will stay out of it. They're also going to wait and see. They're not going to attack America until they see what Trump's policy is going to be vis-a-vis Iran. And finally, they have agreed to halt all actions against Israel. So Israel has basically taken out, at least for now, another party, I think they also saw what, the Americans, right after the Syrian regime fell, basically went all out to try to destroy the remnants of ISIS. I mean, they did more bombing, I think, in 2 days than they'd done in a year. And they saw the firepower that the U.S. brought to that. And they saw, of course, what Israel has done. And they're like, okay, maybe we should take a breather and stop intervening and wait and see how all this shakes out. So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear among the bad guys. That's always a good thing. Israel has shaken everybody up and reframed the Middle East and basically put the Iranians and all its allies on a back foot and struggling and challenging, and they don't know what to do. They don't know what's going to happen. Lucinda just did a €50. Merry Christmas, Yaron. And everyone, remember to reach those donation goals. Thank you, Lucinda. I haven't seen you in weeks, I think. Weeks. Yeah. 4 weeks. It's been a long time. Merry Christmas, Lucinda. Thank you for the $50. Really, really appreciate that. And don't forget to come for the December 31st. I'm going to need all the help I can get. So don't forget to join us December 31st for the big end of year show where we're going to try to reach that 15, maybe 50, but we'll start with 15, maybe go for 50 as a stretch goal. $1,000 of raised during that show. So don't forget December 31st to join us then. All right. Let's see. Global trade. So I read this fascinating story in the Financial Times, actually. It's a really good story. I mean, once in a while, the Financial Times has really good stuff. And basically what the Financial Times is saying, look, there are all these threats to global trade constantly. The war in Ukraine had food prices going through the roof for a while. Obviously, the Houthis blocking the Suez Canal or blocking access to the Suez Canal had transportation costs going through the roof and just seemed to stymie global trade. But also local stuff, like they give an example that there was a big problem in there was a kind of a drought that caused a major shortage in olive oil in Spain, which caused global olive oil prices to spike. And it was really scary if you were a foodie in Spain, because of olive prices basically doubled from mid-2022 to mid-2023 because of droughts in Europe. And of course, Spain is the largest exporter and one of the biggest consumers of olive oil, and where they call olive oil liquid gold. And there was real distress. So what happened? Shortage of olive oil in Spain, a disaster. Well, it turns out that global supply chains adjusted. Basically, Spain started importing olive oil from Tunisia, for example. Households modified their habits. They switched from virgin olive oil to regular olive oil to save some money. Consumer groups put pressure on supermarkets by running daily price comparisons so that olive oil, supermarkets basically wanting to please customers kept olive oil prices as low as they possibly could. And the government ultimately cut VAT taxes, sales taxes on olive oil in Spain. Bottom line is olive oil prices ultimately declined. Spanish cuisine was saved. And overall, people didn't feel the damage that you would have expected, and all because supply chains are incredibly flexible and they can move around. Wheat prices went through the roof because of Russian invasion of Ukraine. So what happened? Well, we started growing wheat, putting an emphasis on growing wheat in other places. Indeed, wheat yields, right, bushels per acre. I mean, this is an amazing statistic. Bushels per acre basically have gone from about 10 bushels per acre in the 1930s, early 1940s, going back to the 19-teens, so for a long time, right? It was about 10 bushels an acre. Since then, you've seen a steady increase of the productivity of farming. That is, the number of bushels of wheat that you can grow per acre has gone from 10 to 40, 4x. And that, of course, is a consequence of crop scientists, innovative agriculture, driving it up. So when wheat prices, went through the roof because of Ukraine as a massive producer of wheat, then other countries increased their wheat production. They dedicated more land for wheat. And because the yields are so high, you don't have to dedicate that much land. And they replaced the lost supply from Ukraine with others. So again, global supply chains adapt. The Houthis, during COVID, right, global freight prices went through the roof. They basically, increased from 2020 to late 2021 by fivefold. So, dollars per 40-foot container increased from under 2,000 to over 10,000. They then crashed really went down during 2022, 2023, and they bottomed out at way under, close to $1,000 per 40-foot container in late 2023. And then you got the Houthis. The Houthis then drove up prices threefold to about 6,000. Well, that's sixfold because they dropped to 1,000. But since then, they've come down quite a bit. And they've come down, not back to the 2,000, not back to the 1,000, back closer to 3,000, but still a significant decline. Companies have figured out how to reroute supply chains, how to move things differently, how to get product to where it's needed without bearing the full cost. So while the Houthis are still doing damage, it's still probably 3 times more expensive than it needs to be, or maybe 2 times more expensive than it needs to be. It's nowhere near the 6 times that it was not that long ago. Again, markets adjust. And at the same time, and another interesting phenomenon is happening, just as everybody's bemoaning the end of globalization, Trump is coming in, world trade is going to end, and, everybody is, what do you call it, looking inside, internally, and global trade is going to struggle. The recent numbers for 2024 suggest that global trade hit all-time highs. All-time highs. This year. So we are at peak trading volume. Peak trading volume. There's never been more global trade than there is right now, which is pretty amazing. We are, probably 20% higher than we were before COVID in 2019. Now, it's true that with Trump coming in, we expect tariffs, particularly on Chinese goods, but maybe on other goods. But shippers are already planning how to reshuffle things, right? So trade from China to the U.S. will probably decline. But you'll probably see a sharp spike in trade from Vietnam to the U.S., or more accurately, from China to Vietnam, where goods will be relabeled made in Vietnam to the United States. Or you might see an increase in trade from China to Mexico, where things might be assembled or might be, again, relabeled made in Mexico and shipped to the United States. That is, everybody expects that in spite of all the talk, in spite of all the anti-China rhetoric, at the end of the day, trade is going to continue to increase. Global trade will continue to increase. Ultimately, global trade, globalization is, to a large extent, what is responsible for the relatively high standard of living we all live with. And there's too much money to be made. And we still live in a world with lots of flexibility. The remnants of capitalism are still pretty strong, and they can overcome even Trump. I'll give you an example, right? China, this relates to the show we did yesterday. China recently said, in retaliation for Biden banning the sale of high-end computer chips to China, China basically said that it was banning the export of antimony, uranium, and gallium to the United States. These are three rare earth materials essential for semiconductor production. And they are basically said that they are banning exports. They're not going to export it to the United States. But when you look at the data, what you find that the United States already essentially stopped buying these materials from China a while ago. And yet, American semiconductor producers are still chugging along. They're still doing their thing. So what's going on? Well, I mean, what is going on is the fact that China continues to export these products to Germany and Japan. And guess what happens when they get to Germany and Japan? They get moved into another container, into another ship, and they get sent to the United States. So they get to the United States one way or the other. Maybe they go to Canada, maybe they go to Mexico, and then they're trucked over to the United States. But just like the attempt to stop, I don't know, German automobiles from getting to Russia failed because all that happened was that, you know, Kazakhstan suddenly was importing a lot more German cars. And those German cars were just driven across the border into Russia and sold there. The same thing happens when China tries to restrict the availability of certain minerals for U.S. Somebody else has it. Somebody else. China has to export them. They need the money. And they're not going to stop. It will reach the United States one way or the other. And then, of course, it is absolutely true that these minerals are not just mined in China. For example, gallium is mined by Rio Tinto, the mining company in Canada. And the United States just has to replace the gallium that it used to import from China with gallium that it now imports from Canada. Canada, that according to Donald Trump, is now going to become the 51st state of the United States. So it really is not going to be, we're not going to be, are we subsidizing when we buy gallium? Are we subsidizing? No, it's the other way around. I can't remember how it goes, right? Trade deficits or subsidies. So yeah, when we buy stuff from other countries, we're subsidizing. So if Canada becomes a 51st state, we won't be subsidizing Canada anymore by buying the gallium. Anyway, in spite of all the negativity, in spite of all the pessimism, in spite of all the doom and gloom, in spite of all the obstacles the statists of the world try to throw in the way of the remnants of capitalism that exist in the world, capitalism wins out. That is, trade wins out. The profit motive wins out. The desire of people to make money, the need of producers to produce, the desire to produce, finds ways. Just like the heroes in Atlas Shrugged always found a way around things and solved problems. That's Dagny, right? the industrialists of today, the producers of today, the financiers and traders of today find ways around the constraints, around the limitations that governments all over the world create to keep our standard of living. And this is, at the end of the day, you know, always asked, why aren't things much worse, Yaron? I mean, the philosophy's bad, all these other things are bad. Why is it? Why is it that things are not a lot worse in the world? And the bottom line is because Dagny is out there working frantically, constantly, nonstop, because she loves it and because she makes money at it, in order to prevent you feeling the full consequences of the utter stupidity, horror, and evil of our politicians. So if you're going to thank anybody, thank Dagny. Thank those CEOs of big business. That's who you should thank. The CEOs of big business that everybody so loves to hate. So loves to hate. So, after 30 years, the FDA has finally decided that it needs to recategorize foods in terms of whether they're healthy or not. They have to rethink the so-called food pyramid. So they're going to come out with a new definition of healthy food. Healthy food. I can't wait for the government finally to tell me what is healthy, because I don't know what I would do without the government telling us what healthy is and what healthy means. And the FDA, of course, responsible for my health, because I can't be responsible for it myself. The FDA is now going to tell us. So in the past, up until yesterday, up until the FDA changed its mind, I think on December 19th, so 5 days ago, sugary cereals, artificial fruit juices, and sweetened yogurts were healthy, according to the government, and the government's never wrong. Starting whenever they roll out these new definitions, none of those foods are going to be healthy. Now, I think it will be a violation of the FDA's regulation for food companies to label them as healthy. So it used to be that the FDA basically focused on individual nutrients. So it had limits on saturated fat, total fat, cholesterol, sodium. And then it had a positive, how many vitamins, minerals, fiber, and protein things had. But now they're looking at food a little differently, maybe a little bit like so many of us are already doing without them. So from now on, they are going to completely revamp how they think of food. They're going to, fruits and vegetables, of course, are going to be defined as healthy. Anything fat-free and low-fat is still going to be healthy. Whole grains will be defined as healthy, not other grains. And, of course, they're going to look not at total fat. They finally, it's taken them 30 years, but the FDA now recognizes that some fats are good for you. So they're going to say the only bad fat is saturated fat. So that's the only thing they're going to define as unhealthy. Everything else is going to be defined as healthy. So, God, and here's the point that I just want to make about this. Government has no business defining what is healthy. Government is not a scientific institution. Government does not, should not, kind of aggregate the scientific consensus. Who the hell knows what it is? Government should not do science. There should be a complete separation between government and science. There shouldn't be a food pyramid. By the way, a lot of the way in which FDA defines what's healthy and what's not healthy and what should be in the pyramid and what should not be in the pyramid is lobbies. There's a big dairy lobby. There's a big meat lobby. There's a big wheat lobby. There's a huge corn and corn syrup lobby. There's a massive Florida-based sugar lobby. So government cannot be trusted with the science. Government is not a scientific institution. Government is an institution of coercion. It's an institution of force. Government should stay out of the debate about health, about diet. It should make recommendations. We've seen the obesity disaster that is America, not just America, but the UK and spreading throughout Europe now. The obesity crisis that arguably is the result of bad food recommendations, bad food policy, a stupid food pyramid, an emphasis on cutting out fats and increasing sugars. I mean, what we need is for all of us to take responsibility of our own health, which does not mean that you should become a health expert, because it does take expertise. I know, we don't trust experts anymore, but we need them. We need them. So all of us, what we need to do is go out there and pick experts to follow. Not randomly, but based on our own best judgment. Not based on what the government tells us. So it's up to us, personal responsibility, to find the best knowledge available out there so that we can adjust our diet to be healthy. None of the government's business. Keep the government's hands off our healthy food. I don't need the government to define for me or for anybody else what healthy food is. Indeed, it only creates problems. It only creates unintended consequences. Predictable, but unintended, usually, consequences. All right. So the left is flipping out a little bit. Elon Musk has called for the elimination of the CFPB. He tweeted, "Delete CFPB." A CFPB, for those of you who are uninitiated, is the Consumer Financial Protection Board. It is a monstrosity created by Dodd-Frank. Those of you who listen to my show on financial deregulation, I covered this there. The CFPB is part of Dodd-Frank. It is a consumer protection board for you with regard to your financial transaction. It's supposed to save you from greedy banks, greedy insurance companies, credit card companies that want to cheat you out of your money and do and have fees and all these other things. It has already fined the industry gazillions of dollars. The CFPB was the creation and the baby of Elizabeth Warren. This was her regulatory agency. She established it. She wanted to be its first director, but she couldn't get, the Senate wouldn't approve her. This is kind of, it's an entity, by the way, that Congress does not provide a budget for. It is an entity whose budget is dictated by the Fed. So the Federal Reserve really, ultimately, the Federal Reserve provides it with the money. So Congress has no real budgetary control over this entity. It's super independent, which is arguably super scary. Super scary. And as a consequence, it runs roughshod over the industry. It's the most feared regulatory agency today. And Musk rightly calls for its elimination. Now, I'm not sure Musk realizes what it would take to delete the CFPB. It would actually take an act of Congress. It would actually have to be in a law. It's part of a law. To delete it would require a law. And again, this is the kind of the naivete of many within the Trump universe. But it would be amazing. Of course, there's an editorial that says, Elon Musk wants to delete many Americans' financial lifeline. And I read that and I said, lifeline? So the CFPB actually writes them checks. No, but this protects them from all that fraud and corruption that's happening. But and here it says, since its founding, the agency has returned more than $19 billion in cash to people who are being scammed by financial institutions. Now, that's not true. Since its founding, the agency has penalized financial institutions to the tune of $19 billion in cash because they were accused unjustly of scamming consumers, where indeed all they were doing were following the contractual contract they had with consumers. For example, much of this money came from so-called predatory payday lenders. And yet, payday lenders are something that the poor rely on. And when you fine them 19 billions or a lot of money, payday lenders disappear and the poor are the one who suffer. But, you know, that's for another time. CFPB is a disaster. If the Trump administration gets rid of the CFPB, that would be huge. That'll be the best thing Trump had done. I can't think of anything else that Trump could do better. You know, I've got a list, but the few likely things that they could do that are better than that, you know, as I said the first time Trump was in office, the thing is to get rid of regulatory agencies, not just to regulate less at the agency level, but to get rid of these agencies completely, right? That's what needs to happen. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, Elon seems to have some influence for now. We'll see how long that lasts. All right, a few quick stories. It turns out that the car industry is, as we know, going through major rethinking, restructuring, for a couple of reasons, both related. One is the complete nuttiness of the West's suicidal approach to electric vehicles. The West is single-handedly forcing its consumers to buy electric vehicles. Clearly, people don't want electric vehicles, particularly Americans, but they are so heavily subsidized. And Alex Epstein sent me an article, which I'll do in a future show, about how subsidized they are. They're subsidized by a huge amount, much more than any of you could even believe, by every government, particularly the United States, but by every European government. So the shift to electrical is completely restructuring the auto industry. And of course, the rise of China as the number one supplier, producer of electric vehicles by far. So in Japan, Japanese companies that have been slow to adopt electric vehicles, partially because they've been kind of rational and didn't see the point because electric vehicles just don't make any sense. In Japan, the Japanese car companies have struggled. And one consequence of that is recently announced that Honda and Nissan are going to merge. I think Mitsubishi is part of the deal as well. So Honda, Mitsubishi, and Nissan will merge to form another giant auto company. It won't quite be as big as Toyota, but it will be much closer to the size of Toyota. And to try to create the size to deal with the complete restructuring of the global automobile markets. You're seeing this, of course, in Germany, where automobile industry is really collapsing, massive declines in profitability, and they are struggling with trying to lay off people, even though German law makes it very, 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 very difficult to lay people off. It'll be interesting to see if the Honda-Nissan merger results in layoffs. Japan makes it very, 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 very difficult to lay people off. But here's more of the consequences of the stupid U.S. and European policy towards electric cars, combined with the sheer dominance of the Chinese in electric car manufacturing. And of course, yeah, I mean, the whole electric car thing is interesting because, of course, Elon Musk gets a lot of his wealth from an electric car company. An electric car company very dependent on a Chinese market, both to supply it with batteries, but also because that's where it produces many of its cars, and up until recently sold many of them. He's just being outcompeted by a lot of Chinese companies these days. China plays a pivotal role in electric cars, therefore in Tesla's future, and it's going to be really interesting how Elon Musk navigates that, given the hostility that Trump exhibits towards China. So we will see. We will see how it all plays out. And if Trump does away with many of the mandates, the electric car mandates, the electricity the fuel mandates, and all of that, given the uncertainty about what happens in the future, how do American car companies deal with that? Toyota, which has bet heavily on hybrids, is probably going to do fine because it can play it both ways. All right, finally, there are mysterious drones flying over, which are really, causing, I think, sleepless nights among national security experts. But they're not happening in New Jersey. They're actually happening in the UK. And they're actually happening over US and British Air Force bases in the UK. And, these are drones that the UK, these airports that have these Air Force bases, that have some of the most sophisticated electronic countermeasures that are supposed to be able to jam the drones, have had no impact on the drones. They've captured none of the drones flying over these bases. So they haven't examined them. These drones seem to have not been affected by any electronic countermeasures, such as jamming. They're unbelievably sophisticated, unbelievably fast, and nobody knows where they come from. They believe that these are not drones that are just on automatic pilot, but that these are drones that are actively being flown around by somebody who is sitting at the controls. But they have not been able to locate any of those places. They don't know where these drones took off and where they've come from. They know almost nothing about them. And we're talking about, in the UK, some of the most sophisticated drone defense systems in the world. Are these Chinese drones? Are these Russian drones? Or, here's my hypothesis, are these US drones trying to test their own technology? Are they the drones of some startup connected to the Defense Department, testing out their ability to fly undetected by electronic measures, unstoppable by electronic measures, unstoppable by defense systems? But the bottom line is nobody really knows. At this point, nobody really knows. Oh, somebody knows, but we don't know. And it seems like higher ups in the UK military are befuddled by this and confused by this. Could this be Palmer Luckey having fun with the Brits? I don't know, but far more interesting than I think the drones in New Jersey, and far more intriguing in terms of what it could actually mean. All right, let's do one more story, and then we'll go to your super chat questions. And I do have a fairly early Christmas dinner, so we can't go for too late today. So let's do this one story, and this is a story that is again befuddling and curious and interesting, and where there is a lot of conspiracy theories and alternative explanations and all kinds of stories and all kinds of stuff that is hard to make heads or tail of, and I don't know yet what at the end of the day is the truth, and that is this attack on a Christmas market in Germany that was instigated by a Saudi man who has lived in Germany for quite a while, but who has been affiliated with anti-Islamist programs within Germany, and indeed has been supposedly a supporter of the AfD, which is opposed to immigration. It's also claimed that he and the posts on social media to this effect that he's an atheist, anti-Saudi, anti-Islam atheist, who has been working to help people leave Saudi Arabia who are also atheists. His frustration supposedly is that because Germany is doing nothing about the Islamist threat, that Germany is going to become Islamist, which is what he escaped Saudi Arabia to avoid. So he came from Saudi Arabia to Germany in order to escape Islamism, and Islamism followed him to Germany. But this is where it doesn't make sense. So he killed a bunch of Germans, 5, and wounded about 100, in order to make what point? In order to make the point that Islamism is bad? That the Germans' behavior towards Islamism is bad? So there is, clearly a challenge here of trying to understand this guy's motivation. Right? Somebody even says that he shouted Allah Akbar. Was he doing that in order to pretend to be an Islamist? So Islamists will be blamed for the attack so that the AfD in the coming elections very soon will win a bigger share? That's also possible. So it's really, really hard to tell exactly what happened here. But the reality is that German officials were warned about him over and over and over again over the last few years, and even leading up to this to this act. He has been threatening violence online for quite a while. And so German leaders are under huge scrutiny and huge attack. And this is playing into the beginning of the election season, which is going to culminate in elections. When is it? I think in March, where Germany will pick a new government, where the AfD is likely to become the second largest political force in Germany, where it might be the case that the largest political party, which will probably be the Conservatives, cannot form a government without the AfD, and will bring, and since they have sworn that they will not form a government with the AfD, it'll bring kind of a political stalemate, similar to what we're seeing in France, to Germany. And this attack is just adding to the, I think, confusion the Germans feel, to the complexity of what is at stake in this election. But so it is going to be super interesting to see how this plays out, right? I don't think he acted as if he was a supporter of AfD. He's been acting in support of AfD for a long time, and he's been an anti-Muslim immigration to Germany for years and years and years, way before this election, way before the AfD became a force. So either he changed his mind, he suddenly became an Islamist. So, there are way too many conspiracy theories, way too many false news out there to really figure out what's going on. We'll have to wait and see what kind of information is ultimately revealed. But no question, this is a confusing one. And no question, it's going to have implications vis-a-vis the elections. And these elections are indeed super important elections. Super important elections in which Germany will determine much of its future, but also a stalemate is going to create real havoc if you have both France and Germany in stalemate, where they cannot form governments, and where kind of the right and left are deadlocked. Not good for Europe. And what does seem to be unequivocal is on the rise is both left and right that's pro-Russia is on the rise. And it's on the rise in Germany and France, in parts of Eastern Europe. And that does not bode well for the future of NATO, for the future of Europe, but for the future, and it does not bode well for Ukraine, of course. But mostly it doesn't bode well for Europe itself. It's not healthy for Europe to be pro-Putin, pro-Russia. The AfD, the AfD is explicitly pro-Russia. So is the far left, this new political party that's also going to do quite well in this coming election. A kind of a environmentalist, pro-Marx, but anti-immigration and pro-Russia, which is a weird combination. But that's this new leftist political party whose name I can't pronounce because it's named after the woman who leads it, and her name is non-pronounceable. A German non-pronounceable name. All right. We will call that the news for December 24th, Christmas Eve. Pretty depressing. And I will turn to your questions. And thank you. You know, we've basically almost reached the goal for the second hour, and we just are about to get past the first hour. So you guys have been very generous today. I really, really, really appreciate that. So let me remind you that we do have a show on December 31st. It will be a year-end review show. It will also be a big fundraiser. We'll try to raise $15,000. Try to find people who are willing to do $500 during the show. If you think about it, I put out this won't give me one second. I'll tell you. I put out about 300 to 360 live shows a year. That means I do about a live show. Now, maybe this also counts for premieres, I don't know. But this is about a live show every day for the whole year. So if you did $500 on December 31st, it would basically be what? $1.25 per show? Seems like a pretty good deal, $1.25 per show. So, and the number of shows has gone up significantly. So it used to be around 200 from 2019 to 2022, and then it's gone up to over 300. Probably by the end of this year, it'll be 330, 335. Last year was 360, so we did even more shows last year. That's live shows. Videos total, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, I don't know. Videos, that's the non-live, and then shorts, and then other. Let's just do total. Total number of videos that I put out last year, or this year, that we put out this year. Shorts, segments from the live shows, plus live, all three categories. Total videos the Yaron Brook show, the Yaron Brook channel, put out during the year. Anybody want to take a guess how many videos we put out during the year? Nobody has a guess? 1,009. And that's up from 800 last year, up from 680 in 2022, 646 2021. So over 1,000 shows. 1,009 shows. Videos, not shows, videos. Our job in 2025. So those, just to give you a sense, those videos, let me change this. This is 2024. So in 2024, those videos, 1009, got 2 million, just under 2.5 million views, 325,000 hours. So 325,000 hours of viewership, 2.5 million views. That's a lot. All right. So that's basically what you're funding by doing the super chats or by making monthly contributions on Patreon or on PayPal. So thank you guys. Really, really appreciate it. But I'm just suggesting on December 31st, a good opportunity to come in and say, okay, I'll give you $1.25 for every show. Here's $500 for the year. Then you can still do stuff during the year to supplement it, but at least that sets the benchmark. How many views? 2.5 million, just under 2.466, 2.467. But that's not the end of the year. I will tell you, come December 31st, on the show, we will go over these statistics in greater detail, and I will tell you exactly how many. Of course, the shorts got the most views, but even the live streams got 663,000 views, the full live streams, with average viewership of 22 minutes, which is long for YouTube, and a total watch time of 252,000 hours, 250,000 hours of watching just in 2024. 325 live videos. All right, let's jump in with the super chats. Thank you, guys. Jason, thank you. Jason did $100 here, which is fantastic. Really, really, really appreciate it, Jason. He says, how would you describe the feeling of inheriting and having to sell an inherited special edition of Mein Kampf for $8,000 to $10,000? What's a good term for the money? War bounty, historical tithe, a gift from the Führer, making a donation to YBS, ARI, my kid's 529 when done. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best thing you could do with money like that. I mean, who is willing to pay $8,000 to $10,000 for it? I mean, that's the horrible thing. But, you know, you can't feel bad about it. They are collectors of books. They don't care about the content. They collect rare first editions or whatever. I don't know how you inherited the special edition. That's an interesting story, I'm sure. But then who is buying it? Probably just a collector. But yeah, it feels ugly, dirty, that such books can sell for so much money. But yeah, I think a good way of dealing with it is donating the money to your favorite cause. Thank you, Jason, for including me in those favorite causes. Okay, let's see. Robert, thank you for the sticker. Gail, thank you for the sticker. Lucinda, I already thanked you for the $50. Really appreciate it. Who else do we have? Wes, thank you for the $50. That's great. Lucinda was actually €50. Stephen, thank you for the sticker. And Enric, thank you for the sticker. So we have reached our 2-hour goal. Thank you, guys. Okay, $50. Hopper Campbell. It's hard for me to believe Kant is responsible for every aspect of bad culture and psychology today. If you read history, you can see there was plenty of envy and nihilism before Kant. Did he just intellectualize and legitimize dark emotions? Well, there's another way to think about it. What he did was intellectualize and legitimize the worst elements of Christianity, which was the dominant set of ideas in the culture before Kant. He saved faith from reason. He destroyed the Enlightenment. He undermined the Enlightenment. He saved altruism. And he saved emotionalism/faith. Now, sure, even before the invent of philosophy, there was bad culture, bad psychology, and nihilism. But in that sense, even then it was shaped by an implicit philosophy. that existed even before people actually invented or understood what philosophy was. So, you know, what Kant did is he legitimizes all those things in a, you know, in a actual philosophy, in a integrated, systematized philosophy that then corrupts philosophers to this day. And to the extent that those philosophers have an impact on the culture, usually very indirectly through the way we're taught every other subject, then what that does is, in an era that was becoming much, 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 much better, in an era that was rejecting Christianity and rejecting nihilism and rejecting emotionalism through the Enlightenment and politically embracing freedom, what Kant does is he launches a counter-movement. So think about the 19th century as the era in which these two ideas battle out. And things are still really good in the world because the Enlightenment is still very strong. But by the time we get into the 20th century, Kant has won. And now you get the rise of communism, the rise of Nazism, and the rise of postmodernism, and the rise of woke and everything else. And there's still remnant of the Enlightenment out there, but they're dying and decaying. So again, you know, if Kant had just come around without the Enlightenment, just being another philosopher in a chain, he would have been bad, but you wouldn't have said, okay, there's a fundamental shift here. He would just be in a line of bad philosophers. But the fundamental shift here comes because he comes after a good period, culturally. A period in which the culture is shifting to the good. And he slams the door shut on further development of that good, further improvement of that good, further expansion of that good. And in that sense, he's a reactionary force to the pre-Enlightenment era. He brings us back to before the Enlightenment. So that's the sense in which he's responsible. Clark says, Kant hasn't been able to destroy us materially. There's still enormous progress in our comfort and standard of living. What Kant successfully accomplished is creating a living death spiritually. He created entire societies of nihilistic zombies. Yeah, but even materially, he has succeeded in slowing our progress down. He is succeeding in not allowing us to have the full benefit of capitalism, the full flourishing of the profit motive and the capabilities of capitalism and individualism. So yeah, we're still doing fine, but we could be doing so much better. I mean, don't let him off the hook so easily. You've got to take into account just how good things could have been if, in a sense, the Enlightenment continues. And then Ayn Rand kind of puts the cap on it, and we all live in capitalist heaven, or capitalist, the known ideal. How much richer, even materially, would we be? Astronomically. Astronomically. So, but it's no question what he really kills is spiritually. But remember that we can't be successful ultimately materially if we're failures spiritually. Nihilists don't produce. And if we can't catch up spiritually, we're going to land up struggling materially as well. Applejack says, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Yaron. Thank you, Applejack. Appreciate the support. Let's see. James says, is introspective evidence of free will the same as introspective evidence from memory? People ask, how do you know you have free will? Where is it? Isn't that just as ridiculous as asking, how do you know you have memory? Yes, I think it is. I think there's similar phenomena. I mean, they're not similar phenomena in terms of how they act, but I think it's similar phenomena in terms of introspection. That's a good point. I mean, it's a good question to ask one of our philosophers who has thought more about free will and its meaning. But yeah, I think that's right. Any introspective knowledge, how do you know? Well, I know it because I observe it directly through introspection. And that's how I know I have this memory. Liam asked, is the reason we, thank you for the $50, is the reason we won't collapse into fascism and the Trump administration can only be fascistic up to a point because we are saturated with a lot more free market intellectuals and think tanks in the West today than there were in the 1920s Germany. Yeah, but it's more than that. We're saturated with the spirit of liberty, which still exists in this country to some extent. But we're also saturated with active voices in opposition who are not crazy and willing to just fold. So even if it's not free market, think about the center-left intellectuals. Think about a Steven Pinker. There just is better, more intellectual forces that are opposed to fascism, at its extreme at least. But it's not just intellectuals. Think of all the business people. I mean, it's going to be really interesting what happens with these Silicon Valley types who are jumping into the Trump administration. How many of them are actually willing to embrace greater fascism, greater authoritarianism? How many of them are naive? How many of them, if confronted with actual authoritarianism, would reject it and fight against it? So we also have a business culture that is freedom-oriented, that is independent thinking-oriented, and in that sense, freedom-oriented, that rejects authoritarianism and fascism in a sense of dictating to them what they should and shouldn't do. So it'll be interesting to see if power corrupts these Silicon Valley guys who are all rushing into the Trump administration, or whether they maintain that level of independence and serve as a bulwark against increased authoritarianism. It's hard to tell. I'm not sure I trust Elon Musk, but maybe some of the other people around him, I just don't know. It's just going to be interesting. Ori says, I just watched The Last of Mohicans, and it's now one of my all-time favorite movies. Yes, it's a brilliant movie. It's one of my favorite movies, certainly one of my favorites from the last 40 so years, since the 80s. Yeah, it's a really, really enjoyable movie. I love that movie. Mike, it already looks like it's going to be a long, stupid 4 years. I'm glad you're here to provide an alternative point of view. Thank you. Yes, it is going to be a long, stupid 4 years. But it's endless. It doesn't stop the stupidity. So it's going to go way beyond 4 years. And I will be here, at least, as Michael says, at least until I'm 75 and maybe beyond that. We'll see. Andrew, is the following accurate? Kant's split between consciousness and reality leads to intellectual dependence, leads to statism. Yes. In a sense, absolutely. That is, if consciousness and reality are not connected, how do we know what's real or what's not? We become more dependent on the equivalent of the philosopher kings. I mean, he's done basically what Plato did. And therefore, that leads to experts who need to run our lives. So, yes, I think that is right. I mean, there's a lot of fleshing out there to do in between, but I think that sequence is right. Think of what Kant is doing is similar to what Plato does. By putting truth in another dimension that can only be achieved by some people. Kant says nobody can reach the reality except through categorical imperatives. The categorical imperatives, though, nobody has. So then you're dependent on somebody telling you what those are. And in that sense, it's the same as telling you what's in the world of forms. All right, let's see. We've got a bunch of these. John Glue has a three-part question. Doesn't the broken window fallacy try and prove that consumption without production leads to leads to no actual economic growth. Isn't the principle to be grasped from the theory that government subsidies are bad things because they take money that could be used to create wealth? Internet says it just proves spending money to repair stuff is bad and that the money should go to other things like buying sneakers for the poor. Really? I mean, I don't know where you got that for what the internet says, but that's nuts, right? That is completely nuts. Did I miss Gail's question? There is a question here from you, Gail, about the Saudis, but I first do the $20 questions and then I do the other questions. I haven't missed it. It's further down on my list. Yes, I mean, broken window fallacy tries to prove that consumption without production leads to no actual economic growth. On the contrary, it leads to economic destruction. It leads to negative growth. And so the broken window fallacy, the broken window fallacy is trying to do more than that. It's trying to show that, to the Keynesians in particular, that any government intervention in the economy, subsidy or otherwise, is going to have destructive ends. Because the government cannot intervene. It cannot intervene without taking money out of the economy somewhere else, either through borrowing or through taxing, which is then taking money away from productive activities. But even if the government intervenes through, let's say, a tariff, it is now trying to restructure the means of production, trying to restructure people's priorities in ways that are destructive because it is, basically replacing what the market would have done with something that leads to less productivity, increased prices. And what Hazlitt is really encouraging us to do is, and he says this in the introduction to the book, is to think more deeply about economics. Not just to look at first level perceptual effects, but to dig deeper into the causal chain of what happens when you do X. How does that affect everything else? So breaking the window, what does that actually do? Well, it creates this economic activity. But then he says, but think deeper. Where did that economic activity come from? It came from money that would have been deployed to other investments that would have created better economic activity if it hadn't been deployed just to replace the window. So it's really encouraging us to look deeper into how an economy works. And by the way, the broken window fallacy in and of itself was taken from Bastiat. John also says, almost forgot, Merry Christmas, YBS Rules. Thank you, John, and thank you for all the support during the year. Andrew, trade is a key component of global social harmony. Protectionism creates international suspicion, derision, and social strife. Yes, and ultimately, encourages and leads us towards war rather than towards cooperation and win-win relationships. So trade is win-win. War is lose-lose. And without trade, people are inclined towards war, or because people put up these awful restrictions. Mindspan says, the best analysis I've seen of the terrorist attack in Germany is from Atheist Republic's recent podcast on him. They've known who he was for many years. All right, I'll check that out. I haven't seen that, so I'll check it out. Yeah, people have known who he was for many years, and part of the issue with him is he's been unstable and identified as unstable for many years. So, Michael, was Israel a very obnoxious, hard place to live? Are you glad you left? Yeah, I mean, Israel is a fairly obnoxious, in your face, energetic, but also aggressive place. It's in the driving. It's in the way people deal with one another. And absolutely, I'm glad I left. Not because of that, but I'm just glad I left for lots of different reasons. My life is much better having left. So I got to do what I really love doing, which I couldn't have done in Israel. So it's a collectivist place ultimately, or it used to be. And yeah, there is a certain there's a tribalism and there's certain obnoxiousness that comes with that tribalism. Everybody's in your business kind of attitude. Gail, should we really be cooperating with the Saudis? In an ideal world, no. In the world in which we live in, it's the least of our worries right now, given the Saudis' attitude. Saudis really do seem to be working as a moderating force in the Middle East and over the Islamist movement. They have definitely suppressed the Wahhabi sect within Saudi Arabia, which was a fountainhead of some of the worst radical forces within Islam. So ideally, no. If we had a proper foreign policy, no. But we don't. So I wouldn't put stopping to deal with the Saudis as the top priority. Stopping to deal with the Iranians and having a policy regarding Chinese and putting an end to the Qatari, whatever it is that they're doing, undermining everything Western in Qatar, those should be the priorities. Michael says, in a heavily regulated mixed economy, the S&P 500 still averaged 10.5% over 20 years. In a free society, would that be 30 to 40% a year? Well, it's not clear, right? Because it's possible that in a free society, these companies, there'd be more competition. They'd be slightly less profitable. And because there's more competition, so it's not clear the S&P 500 would go up. Indeed, you could argue that in a free society, the S&P 500 would go up less. Part of the 10.5 is just to compensate for inflation. That would go away. So no, I don't think you can extrapolate anything to a free society because you're not taking into account all the factors and the monetary factors of having proper money, but also the very fact that there'd be just more competition, less entrenched forces. Noel, thank you. Noel says, Merry Christmas. Thank you for the $20. Really appreciate that. Did you see somebody just tried to assassinate Nick Fuentes? I did not. I guess it couldn't happen to a nicer human being, but I did not see that. No. I'll check it out. I missed that in my news searches. Supikask says, Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah. Thank you, Supikask. Not your average algorithm. Does a part of you think, okay, I'm probably fighting a losing battle, but at least I'm having fun and making a living along the way? Well, it depends how you define the battle. If the battle is change the culture during my lifetime, then I've known, not part of me thinking, I've known I'm fighting a losing battle forever, since I started the battle. I never thought I would win the battle in terms of changing the culture. If one thinks in terms of one mind at a time, changing people's lives slowly, then no, I'm not losing the battle at all. I think, let me just read you what Hector says. Hector Reason 86 says, as a former Che Guevara fan, I assume, with the deepest gratitude, I commend you, Yaron, for obliterating his vestiges of collectivism, paving his forward and triumph of individual liberty. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Hector, and thank you. So one might at a time, I seem to be winning. Yeah, everybody's goal is to change the world. The question is, what do you mean by that? Is the goal to change the world so that it's an objectivist world in your lifetime? Then anybody who says that is delusional. If the goal is to make the world a better place by spreading objectivism and increasing the number of objectivists and making those objectivists more knowledgeable and more passionate and living better lives, then yeah, that's very doable, and it is doable right now. Not your average algorithm says, breaking news. Quote, Candace Owens horrified to learn Christmas was started by the birth of a Jew. It's kind of shocking, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, people are horrified. There's this movie on Netflix or somewhere, a new movie about the life of Mary, mother of Jesus. And they cast an Israeli actress. And people were horrified how you could cast a Jewess as Mary. And you have to kind of go, wait a minute. Mary was Jewish. Certainly she was up until Jesus was born. And certainly there was no such thing as a Christian religion until about 70 years after he was born, with the publication of the what do you call it? Paul and Luke. Well, Paul is before that. So, maybe you could say there's a Christian religion starting with Paul. Maybe. But in Jesus' time, it's not Christianity. It's just a sect of Judaism. It's just a different interpretation of Judaism. She was a Jew and he was a Jew. Frank says, Roger Gelty of The Who says that people treat NHS like a buffet. Do you sense this too? Also, did you meet many fighters from the birth of Israel? Yeah, I mean, NHS is definitely, they go there and they pick and choose what they want. But of course, it's a buffet where you don't get what you want, where you sometimes have to wait in line for months for what you want. But yeah, when you offer something for free, it's overconsumed. Did I meet many fighters from birth of Israel? Yeah, I mean, some of the parents of my friends were part of the birth of Israel and part of fighting for the birth of Israel. Certainly the grandparents of many of my friends were. So yes, as a child, I certainly did. Andrew, people either don't understand or evade that when a government agency investigates a private company, there's very little recourse for a company other than to settle. Absolutely. I mean, they basically got a gun pointed at them. They could be completely destroyed. Facts don't necessarily matter. A lot of these things are adjudicated in regulatory courts that are not exactly set up as innocent before proven guilty. Yeah, I mean, settling is the cheapest, easiest, best, often way to deal with the threat. Mindspan Wellness. Many native German and Arabic speakers say terrorist Taleb didn't say Allah Akbar. He was an atheist, activist for nearly 2 decades. I've seen that. No reason to think otherwise. He was a paranoid and delusional individual. Yes, he was mentally problematic, but from everything I've seen, he was an atheist. And again, there's a lot of conspiracies, a lot of alternative stories out there. A lot of these suicide bombings are consequences. A lot of people who join death cults like Islamism is are mentally sick, mentally not there. Matthew says, do determinists have a theory of mind that produces objective knowledge? To me, it creates a contradiction for their position on free will. For me too. So they do have a theory, but the theories seem to me to be contradictory or seem to me to be arbitrary. Okay? I mean, think about, even at the simple level, think about, what's his name? God, the famous atheist, determinist that I often mention, Sam Harris. Think about Sam Harris telling you you don't have free will, but insisting you make the right choices. They hold contradictions, it seems. Supkaski says, how is Hanukkah celebrated in Israel? Is it commercialized like Christmas is in America? A little bit. Not quite, but it's not a very religious holiday to begin with. It's a more nationalist holiday. Hanukkah celebrates the victory of the Jews over the Greeks and the establishment of an independent Jewish state. During in a pre-Roman Greek period, where a Jewish monarchy was established to replace the Greeks. And it mentions a miracle by God where some lamp that had only oil for 1 day lands up lighting the temple for 8 days. But it's not a miracle that allowed them to win. They won because they fought hard. They won, and this is a historical fact that they won, right? So the Maccabees and established a monarchy. So it's not very religious to begin with. So it's quite secular, and I haven't been in Hanukkah in Israel for a very, 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 very long time. My guess is it's more commercialized today than it was back when I was in Israel. All right. Thank you. We did phenomenally well on the Super Chat. I really, really appreciate it. It makes up for the tepid Super Chats we've had over the last few days. So really, really appreciate that. Those of you who missed my China talk from yesterday, I think you'd really enjoy it. I think it was quite good. So check it out. It was yesterday. It should be out as a podcast sometime today. But it's definitely on YouTube. So check that out. And no shows tomorrow. I'm going to take Christmas off. Hard to believe, but I'll take Christmas off. And then we will have a show on Thursday. So I will see you all on Thursday. Have a fantastic Christmas. Enjoy the gift giving. Enjoy receiving gifts. It's okay to enjoy receiving gift. It's okay to enjoy giving gifts too. Enjoy the camaraderie. Enjoy the love. Enjoy family, friends, whoever you have coming around for Christmas. Enjoy the food, the merriment, whatever it is. Have fun. Enjoy. I will see you all on Thursday. Bye, everybody. Oh, Jacob asked, did you get my email regarding sponsorship? I did. I'm working out what I'm doing with healthcare, but I've already got $1,000 for healthcare, but I might be doing 2 shows. So if you want to, I think you were going to do $250 for healthcare. I think that's what it was. Let me just open up the email. $250. Oh, on the immigration show to cover labor regulations. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I confused your ask. So labor regulations is going to have to be a separate show. First of all, because I have so much to say about immigration that I don't think we're going to get to labor regulations other than maybe as they apply directly to immigrants. So we'd have to think about doing a separate show. So here's the thing. Jacob would like to sponsor a show on labor regulations and how to unwind labor regulations. And he is willing to put up $250 for that. The question is, are there other people who are willing to put up the rest? That's another $750. So maybe another 3 people, each willing to do $250 to do a show on that. So if you are, email me at yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. Thank you, Jacob. And I'll try to promote it again on Thursday. All right, everybody. See you Thursday. Have a great, 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 wonderful, amazing Christmas.